awareness such as the Alert California wildfire cameras and the Caltrans road conditions cameras. We hope you'll take some time today to prepare so that your family can be Mendo ready. Thank you.
Are you prepared? We're the Office of Emergency Services, and we're committed to providing the most up-to-date and accurate information so that you and your family can stay safe during an emergency. Part of being prepared is knowing your hazards and taking proper precautions. Visit mendoready.org. On the Know Your Hazards page, you can find hazards for where you work, where you live, and where your kids go to school. On the Plan and Prepare page, you'll find a plan template. It's important to know what you're going to do, what you're going to take with you, how you're going to communicate, where you're going to go, and how to get there.
One great way to prepare is to pack a go bag. Each member of your family should have their own go bag. Visit our website, mendoready.org, to get a list of items that should be in your go bag.
Gathering and organizing important documents before an emergency is an important part of preparedness. So visit mendoready.org today, where you can find a list of important documents that you should have ready near your go bag in case you have to evacuate.
Not every emergency requires people to evacuate. An emergency kit will have supplies for you to remain self-sufficient for 72 hours. Find a list of supplies for disaster kits on our website, mendoready.org.
A prepared community is a resilient community that will recover faster from disasters. So take some time today, visit our website, get yourself prepared so you can be Mendo ready.
A beautiful, clean river doesn't start here. It starts here. What we put down our storm drains goes straight from our streets into our local creeks. Simple changes can make a big impact. Like when you wash your car, the best solution is washing at a professional car wash. But if you wash at home, divert wash water to an area where it can soak into the ground, like a planter strip. Also, empty your bucket of dirty wash water in a sink. The wash water will make its way to the treatment plant, where it is cleaned. You probably know how to pick up your pet's poop when you're out on a walk. After all, it's the neighborly thing to do. But what about the pet waste in your backyard? Pick it up regularly, and especially before rain or irrigation water washes any of it into a backyard drain. Your pet's poo is full of bacteria and nutrients that can contaminate our creeks. Scoop the poo, bag it, and put it in your garbage. When tending to your yard or garden, check the weather. and prevent over-irrigation. Runoff of fertilizer, herbicides, landscape materials, compost piles, and leaf debris pollute our creeks. Remember, timing is everything. Pick up any litter or trash that may get into the streets. If you grab it before water or wind arrives, it doesn't have a chance of ending up in our creeks. It's up to each of us to take care of our creeks and rivers. They're ours to protect. Find out more at streetstocreeks.org.
Are you prepared? We're the Office of Emergency Services, and we're committed to providing the most up-to-date and accurate information so that you and your family can stay safe during an emergency. Visit mendoready.org. It's our one-stop shop for emergency information. You can sign up for emergency alerts, find your pre-established evacuation zone on our current emergencies map, and find hazard and preparedness information.
Imagine you're faced with a disaster such as a wildfire and you're ordered to evacuate. I'll bet you wish you had more time in that moment. Now's your chance to buy yourself that time. Sign up for Nixle and Mendo Alerts on our website, mendoready.org. Do it today.
If you want your family to be as resilient as possible, it's important to take some time today and visit mendoready.org, where you can look up your pre-established evacuation zones on our current emergencies map. You can also find important tools to help maintain your situational awareness, such as the Alert California wildfire cameras and the Caltrans road conditions cameras. We hope you'll take some time today to prepare so that your family can be Mendo ready. Thank you.
Are you prepared? We're the Office of Emergency Services, and we're committed to providing the most up-to-date and accurate information so that you and your family can stay safe during an emergency. Part of being prepared is knowing your hazards and taking proper precautions. Visit mendoready.org. On the Know Your Hazards page, you can find hazards for where you work, where you live, and where your kids go to school. On the Plan and Prepare page, you'll find a plan template. It's important to know what you're going to do, what you're going to take with you, how you're going to communicate, where you're going to go, and how to get there.
One great way to prepare is to pack a go bag. Each member of your family should have their own go bag. Visit our website, mendoready.org, to get a list of items that should be in your go bag.
Gathering and organizing important documents before an emergency is an important part of preparedness. So visit mendoready.org today, where you can find a list of important documents that you should have ready near your go bag in case you have to evacuate.
Not every emergency requires people to evacuate. An emergency kit will have supplies for you to remain self-sufficient for 72 hours. Find a list of supplies for disaster kits on our website, mendoready.org.
A prepared community is a resilient community that will recover faster from disasters. So take some time today, visit our website, get yourself prepared so you can be Mendo ready.
A beautiful, clean river doesn't start here. It starts here. What we put down our storm drains goes straight from our streets into our local creeks. Simple changes can make a big impact. Like when you wash your car, the best solution is washing at a professional car wash. But if you wash at home, divert wash water to an area where it can soak into the ground, like a planter strip. Also, empty your bucket of dirty wash water in a sink. The wash water will make its way to the treatment plant, where it is cleaned. You probably know how to pick up your pet's poop when you are out on a walk. After all, it's the neighborly thing to do. But what about the pet waste in your backyard? Pick it up regularly, and especially before rain or irrigation water washes any of it into a backyard drain. Your pet's poo is full of bacteria and nutrients that can contaminate our creeks.
for this particular item, for technical program updates, we're not seeking direction from the board at this time. We are just simply presenting and allowing for discussion. So I would encourage, since we're here, if there are questions from any of the directors, to try to direct those to staff now. We'll have other opportunities. So what we've done is we've broken out individual decision points into the agenda as individual action items. So in terms of those decision points, we'll get to those at 4B and 4C. So just open it up to directors for any Q&A.
Are there any questions? All right, seeing none.
All right, thank you. So we'll go ahead and proceed. And I should make the comment that team meeting, and this will become relevant when the decision point is up for discussion. They felt it was most appropriate to pursue only a periodic evaluation at this time. All right, and with that, we will go ahead and keep moving through the topics. All right, so we're on to phase 1 of the well inventory and key tasks for phase 2. Okay, last fiscal year, Larry Walker Associates was tasked with phase 1 of the Ukiah Valley Basin well inventory. And as a reminder, here are some of the key objectives that were undertaken as part of that effort. The hope was really to develop a spatial and tabular database that was open source, would aggregate existing public information, make it very easy to update and improve in the future as more information becomes available, and also improve the information and quality of information from publicly available sources. And so that included cross-checking against different data sources, including the online system for well completion reports, sort of having that as a starting point, and then improving and refining well locations, and also associated well construction data, things like completion depth, screened intervals, and making sure that was as accurate as possible. As part of this phase 1 effort, we also identified data gaps that could be addressed for phase 2. And so some of the key results are written up in a technical memorandum and delivered to the general manager the very start of July, and then also packaged up these databases to be shared and memorialized as well. And so again, in thinking through how the information were improved, phase 1 really went through and tried to prioritize the most important information for the initial effort. A lot of this information is important for model calibration, the representation of pumping in the model, and then also good interpretation of groundwater levels in our monitoring network. In the GSA's monitoring network. And so the priority wells that were identified included the groundwater monitoring network, and we got some detailed information there that again is very useful for interpreting that information and calibrating the model, understanding the system dynamics better, and then also because they tend to be 2 of the larger water users within the basin, understanding public supply well locations, screened intervals, total depths, and understanding the pump test data that accompany those, and then also, as much as possible, agricultural or irrigation wells, and getting that information. So what you see here is the original data associated with OSCAR, which is what we call that online well completion report database from DWR. And here you can see this is compared against the public land survey system grid, and many of the wells appear right on top in the center of these PLSS grids. This could be sometimes dozens of records, and that's simply because there wasn't better location information available in the online database. But by reviewing the well completion reports the actual digitized documents themselves, we can often very much pull improved information. So that was one of the key tasks that took place. So here you can see an comparison between the original OSCAR database well locations in yellow, and then in blue, the locations that were improved upon. So this created a much more nuanced understanding of where many wells are located throughout the basin. So again, this is very important for understanding monitoring data, for understanding where pumping is taking place, what areas are vulnerable, if we have, say, domestic wells or public supply wells, and just gives a much better understanding of water dynamics in the basin and representation in the integrated hydrologic model. So in total, we reviewed over 2,700 well records. We're able to improve location and total depth wherever possible. And so you can see that was for many, many, many of the entries, which we were very pleased with. And in addition, we had that additional information, things like screened interval, additional construction data for 63 wells in the current and historic monitoring network, 24 public supply wells, current and former, and then also over 290 agricultural irrigation wells. I should note that we applied a 1977 construction date cutoff just for phase one. And that was in alignment with Mendocino County Drought Resilience Program, the cutoff that they applied for wells that they examined as part of their effort. And that's something we hope to re-examine in phase two. So one other thing that I want to draw your attention to is that there are more than 1,000 wells that had unknown or blank use codes, meaning we weren't able through this initial effort to decipher what their appropriate use is. So these could be more supply wells, domestic wells, they could be irrigation wells. That's something that will require more investigation. All right, so for phase two, there are still many tasks that would greatly improve the quality and usability of information that's part of the well inventory database. And so again, addressing those more than 1,000 wells with unknown use would be a significant improvement and allow us, again, better representation in the model of pumping in areas that might be vulnerable. In addition, we did not have sufficient wells identified through phase one of the well inventory that were for irrigation or ag use as compared to what model and water budget anticipates would be required to meet ag demand. And so there are probably some wells that have dual uses or just did not have designation. Again, we have all these unknown or blank designation wells. There are probably some agricultural or irrigation wells that are included in that. And so we'd really like to undertake the effort to clarify that situation. We also want to have some better cross-referencing with the monitoring database. We didn't have successful identification of completion reports and construction information for all of our monitoring wells, which is really important, again, for using that data. And then also making sure we have good elevation data for all monitoring wells. Some do have very high quality elevation data, others don't. It's incredibly important for modeling and understanding groundwater dynamics. And as I said, we want to address and evaluate wells that were drilled before 1977, and then also identify and remove inactive wells. So entries into OSCAR could be for well destruction, well deepening, or initial well drilling, and there isn't good crosstalk between those entries. So we'd like to improve that so we can really get an understanding of an improved picture of what wells are active in the basin. And then finally, moving over some of these improvements so that they're represented in the model. Again, the model is being used for the interconnected surface water study. It's going to be used as part of the periodic evaluation. We want to make sure that we get the best improvements in there that we can. And then finally, assessing some of the domestic and public supply well vulnerability. So there's been guidance released by DWR to advance this, and one of the key efforts is making sure that GSA's inventory and have a good understanding of the location and depths, screened intervals for public supply wells and domestic wells, and also use that information to help plan for future monitoring sites, for example, so that the condition and potential vulnerability of those wells can be assessed. So again, this is a lot of information, but I hope that this provides some sense of the progress that's been made, and then also the continued improvements that still are ahead. And that actually is my pause point before we move forward. So I will pass it back over. Please let me know if there are any questions.
All right, are there any questions from the board? Okay, seeing none.
Great, thank you. All right, so Blake, should I hand this back to you at this stage so that you can talk through the potential decision points that are being brought forth?
Yes, so that concludes agenda item 4A, technical program updates, and we'll now move to item 4B, which is a discussion of well inventory phase 2 activities and their fiscal impact. And just to expedite the conversation, staff are recommending to proceed with well inventory phase 2 activities, which would require an amendment to the on-call technical support agreement with Larry Walker and Associates. I'd love, Audra, if you could stay on and answer any technical questions in response from the board.
Certainly.
Okay, are there any questions or comments from the board? I can. I have a question. General
Yes.
Manager Adams, can you explain a little bit about what's the need for amending the on-call technical support agreement with Larry Walker and Associates?
Yes, so although the agency is budgeted for this work, it is not currently scoped. So what is scoped is phase 1, but not phase 2. So it's a simple administrative effort to enable that work to proceed. But as I mentioned, if the board's decision is to proceed, there will be no fiscal impact as we've budgeted appropriately for these activities. They just need to be aligned with the contract in place.
Thank you.
I think it makes sense to move forward with the phase 2, and then I guess separately we're going to be talking about the plan evaluation versus the plan amendment.
Yes, that's correct. And again, we've just separated those decision points as they're just for point of order and to ensure that the decision was, because they're two different decision points, that there wasn't confusion about approving all of it together. So this, for agenda 4B, it's simply to, it's specific to well inventory phase 2 and amending the agreement with Larry Walker to enable that work.
All right, we'll look for a motion.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion by Director Gasca and then a second by Director Bailey. We could have a roll call vote, please.
Member Gasca. Member Bailey.
Aye.
Vice Chair Crane.
Aye.
Chair Klein.
Aye. All right, that passes. We'll move now to item 4C.
Thank you. And again, 4C is in a similar vein, but a separate decision point. And staff are recommending that the agency conduct a periodic evaluation only of the agency's groundwater sustainability plan, forego the option to conduct a periodic evaluation and plan amendment at the same time, which was the more costly option, and authorize the general manager to amend the on-call technical contract with Larry Walker to enable that work.
All right, is there any discussion, comments, questions? Director Bailey.
My understanding is that the TAC supports this, and it seems like that makes sense from multiple viewpoints, especially because the state hasn't issued guidance around the GSA criteria, I guess is the best term going forward, and so we don't really have that guidance on which to base a plan amendment.
Yeah, in response, I would just say that's a fair assessment of the discussion that the TAC had. They did indeed recommend that we proceed with just the PE option. And I think I would just share that I think one of the main concerns was the cost, the fiscal impact of proceeding with an amendment. And that fiscal impact was estimated to be about $200,000 above what has already been budgeted. So I think that was the main concern expressed by members of the TAC at the October 15th meeting.
Yeah,
Director Gasca.
just a comment. Yeah, because I'm on the TAC, and we felt that the plan itself, in terms of our requirements by the state, it's not perfect, but it's good enough. And I think there are some small, I think agriculture's usage of groundwater is overestimated, but then the cost is worth more, like we were talking earlier, more. It would cost us more to get that clarification than it's really worth. So we would rather just stick with the periodic evaluation.
All right, any other comments or questions? Why don't we call for public comment?
No public online. No public comment online.
Thank you, and seeing none in the room, we will look for a motion.
I will make a motion for the recommended action to go with option 1 with just the periodic evaluation.
We have a second?
I'll second.
All right, a motion by Director Gasca and a second by Director Bailey. If we could have a roll call vote, please.
Member Gasca.
Aye.
Member Bailey.
Aye.
Vice Chair Crane.
Aye.
Chair Klein.
Aye. All right, moving now to item 4D, possible approval of cost-sharing agreement with the Small Groundwater Sustainability Agency Coalition. And I'll just thank Audra for her presentation as we're jumping to this next item. And we'll turn it now to General Manager Blake Adams.
Thank you. So this item before us this afternoon is probably a new topic, but so I'll spend just a brief moment on it. Essentially, there exists in California this small GSA coalition, which is comprised of general managers, different board members from small GSAs across the state. I have had the pleasure to attend several of those meetings over the last year and have found the group to be extremely helpful. And I think the work that they'll be leading and what this decision point is specific to is a cost-sharing agreement that will allow this agency to obtain and participate in lobbying efforts at the state level for specific to small GSA issues. And so the estimated cost is somewhere between $3,000 and $6,000 for the agency to join in on that agreement. The reason there's a range is because it's really dependent on what the number of the other agencies that are participating. But it's in that ballpark, and I believe this is a high return on investment for the agency, as it will allow us to have to participate in efforts to strengthen the broad landscape of policy and regulations, requirements, and also available funding at the state level for the future. So there's more detail captured in the staff report, but this is a fairly straightforward thing, which would allow us as an agency to participate in those efforts. And so staff are recommending that we do enter into this cost-sharing agreement with the Small Groundwater Sustainability Agency Coalition. I'm happy to answer any follow-up questions or concerns.
All right, are there any questions or comments? Director Bailey.
So this is an agreement that remains in effect so long as at least 5 parties remain party to this agreement, and that 3,000 to 6,000 that you're talking about is an annual cost?
Correct.
And currently, there's a list of, I think it was 16 or 18 different agencies that are looking to sign on.
Mm-hmm.
That comes out to like 1,600 per party, but so it's not sure if all of these different parties are signing on. They're all kind of considering it at this time.
Yes, I think there's I think broad interest and agreement that it's moving forward, so that there will be a cost sharing agreement in place. We were just encouraged to be open-minded about the possibility of there being a smaller group interested, but I think there's a strong interest, and I think that number that you cited is probably ballpark of what we can expect. And that would mean that the cost would be a little bit lower than maybe what we've estimated. But I have assurances that it would not be more than that $6,000 number. In fact, that's probably very unrealistic.
Okay, yeah, because that's if you take the $30,000 cost and divide it amongst the minimum of 5 parties. Great.
Was that 30,000 though for the entire year or just for 6 months? Because I'm looking on page 181 of our packet, and it says for the last, which item is this? For the last 6 months of fiscal year 25-26, the advocacy and management costs were $30,000.
Mm-hmm.
So if that's what we're basing our yearly payment on, it'd be 60,000 divided amongst the entities, correct? I just want to make sure we have more information than just a ballpark.
I believe that that understanding is correct, as I understand it. And again, speaking with the head of the Small GSA Coalition, the number that was cited to me was between 3,000 and 6,000, which I think 4 is probably a realistic number to expect, somewhere in that ballpark.
So we would need at least 10 total members to keep it under the 6,000 a year.
Yes, and by joining, we contribute to the lowered share costs across the group as well.
Any other comments or questions? I have some, but won't allow. Okay. General Manager, you said you participated in a couple of meetings with this group. How frequent does this group meet?
They meet once a month, and depending on different activities in Sacramento, so if there are particular special topics that arise, they might meet a little bit more frequently.
And how were you able to participate in this group without us being one of the parties?
The invitation was relayed to me, I think, from the former general manager, and I would just add that most of the participants are at the management level. I don't believe there was a requirement for board of director approval to participate, but I think if there's clarity needed for that moving forward, we can seek that out.
No, I'm not asking for direction. I'm just trying to understand the context. One of the early conversations I had with West Geos was around the services they provided to us as the administrative contractor. They were already a party to this group, and so that through that offering, we didn't have to pay for involvement in that because they were already involved. So I just want to note that for our board of directors and our decision making, right? We've gone with a new administration model, but there are other costs that maybe we didn't account for when going down that pathway. And I see that Director Crane has a comment or question, so I'm going to turn it to him.
If we participate, we agree to participate, what are the off-ramps?
So I would imagine if in a year's time we felt that, it wasn't a worthwhile venture to continue, we could exit that agreement, I would believe. So this would be, the decision point is to enter into the cost sharing agreement, and annually we could revisit that if need be. I would also say at any given time, if that need presented itself, we could probably exit the contract. The agreement, which is attached, is just the proposed cost share agreement. And I would need to go through to see if there's language for us, but there's a section about withdrawal. Any party may withdraw from this agreement upon 30 days advance written notice to the administrator. So we do have an ability to exit if we needed to.
Another part of the question, if not enough people signed up, would those that had signed up be obligated to fund it at a higher level for it to continue, or would they have the opportunity to say, nope, not going to do that?
Yeah, I think to the heart of your question, what staff are seeking today is direction to proceed or to not, but the chair would have an opportunity to approve that final dollar amount. So I don't believe we would be signing a cost share agreement without an understanding of what our cost would be. So I think we're just waiting to see how many actually sign up to agree verbally. The reason that this is on the agenda is to have that formal direction. The other agencies themselves are seeking direction from their boards as well. So we should have a number that we're confident in by the time that final agreement comes our way, and we would be able to sign off with confidence knowing how much it would cost and who else would be involved.
I move the recommended action.
I second.
Any public?
All right, we'll look for any public comment.
No public comment online.
All right, and seeing none in the chambers, I'm going to just make really quick comments because I think it's important context for our general manager and for the board as well. These conversations around the smaller or medium priority basins have continued happening across the state. In my role as a county supervisor involved with CSAC, which is the county association, and then RCRC, the Rural Counties Association, there's been recent, like within the last 3 weeks, an uptick of conversations around how we can reduce the requirements for the smaller GSAs that maybe don't need to have the same level of reporting. And so I see this as really a positive thing for us to be involved with, and hopefully some opportunities for involvement in that broader kind of statewide conversation that's taking place. Locally, like in our region, Lake, Humboldt, Modoc, and I believe Siskiyou are some of the counties that are a part of that conversation, and so would be happy to collaborate with the general manager and kind of be a part of those conversations. It's something I'll be spearheading from my role as a county supervisor. So we'll now look for a roll call vote, please.
Member Gasca?
Aye.
Member Bailey?
Aye.
Vice Chair Crane?
Aye.
Chair Klein?
Aye.
And Chair Klein, we're getting some feedback online that some people have mics on, so just a reminder to turn your mic on when you speak.
Thank you for that reminder. Okay, we will move now to item 5, which is the consent calendar, the approval of the minutes for the August 28th, 2025 GSA special meeting. Are there any edits or comments on our minutes or consent calendar? We have a motion from Director Crane. And looking for a second.
I'll second.
The second from Director Bailey. Do we have any public comment online?
No public comment online.
Great. If we could have a roll call vote, please.
Member Gasca? Member Gasca abstains. Member Bailey?
Aye.
Vice Chair Crane?
Aye.
Chair Klein?
Aye. All right, thank you. We will move now to item 6. 6A is updates from General Manager.
Thank you, Director Klein. I'm going to ask City Clerk to pull up our presentation deck. Thank you. All right, so just going to be providing some broad programmatic updates today and a specific request to review the City of Ukiah's Administrative Service Agreement and touch upon the work that the former administrative service provider, West Jost, what they are doing during this transition to date. Next slide, please. Fortunately, we don't have that many slides. So you'll see items B, C, and D. Larry Walker and Associates just covered those, but I just wanted to include them just to emphasize all of the work that's going on behind the scenes. So really pleased to see how much progress we've made in short time on the Upper Russian River Interconnected Surface Water Groundwater Dependent Ecosystem Study, as well as getting direction today on the 2027 periodic evaluation and getting approval to proceed with the well inventory phase 2. In addition to what I would kind of lump those three topics into, which is implementation of the groundwater sustainability plan, we also have before us an opportunity to receive pro bono services, facilitation support services from Stantec, which is a consultant provided by DWR. And we, specifically me, have been working with Stantec staff to develop an agency operations and strategic plan, which are two separate things, an operational plan and a strategic plan for the agency, which did not exist prior to this date, as well as undergoing some governance reform efforts to improve the joint powers agreement and the bylaws, and also identify the most effective strategies for ongoing tribal engagement. So I'll just be focusing on item A, as Larry Walker and Associates covered B, C, and D, and then we'll talk about transition and provide a brief fiscal update at the end. Next slide, please. Thank you. So in terms of, I mentioned we're working with Stantec on three kind of different fronts. So one is to develop an operations and strategic plan. This need basically arose from a lot of the due diligence and internal conversations that management have been having with both the previous GM, current staff, technical staff that have been involved with the agency for years. And essentially what these documents will lay out on paper all of the different activities that the agency that should perform under the GSP, but a little bit more substance to them, providing more color. So for example, if there was a goal to improve data quality, that might be outlined as a management practice in the GSP. This document would operationalize that and have essentially more context and steps to it, so that members of the public, members of the board, future GMs, future member agencies can have a better handle of the operations that are going on. And the same is true with the strategic plan, a little bit more visionary focused and specific to, probably the future horizon of the agency, the next phase, which would likely get into, how do we want to approach fees? How do we want to approach the future work? How are we going to fund this agency over, a 5-10 year period as opposed to year by year? And so a lot of the work that's been going on that I've been involved with personally has been to kind of conduct an internal audit of the agency, spending lots of time talking with staff, our consultants, certain stakeholders, directors, and kind of weighing all that and trying to identify areas of improvement and then try to operationalize those. The next sort of topic area is on the government's reform piece. So this work really kind of started before my time with the agency. there seemed to have been an understanding that the joint powers agreement and the bylaws required some updates, as the last time that I believe both were updated was in 2017. So obviously the agency has come a long way since then. That's about almost 10 years. And so we're working with Stantec to make red line edits to both the JPA and the bylaws, and we expect to bring those to the board of directors in due time, and we'll see a little bit more on timing there. But the goal is to provide this board an opportunity to weigh in on those proposed changes this winter and spring, with those final decisions to be made before the next fiscal year. And I will say, for those that might be concerned that we are going to overhaul these governance documents, that is not the goal. The goal is to find improvement, specifically for clarity about roles, responsibilities, and things like, what do you do if a director is absent? Is there an alternate? Are there, other actions that might need to take place, disciplinary actions? That's just one specific example. There are several, but most is about clarity and improvement. And then the last topic area is on the side of tribal engagement. And so we've been working with Stantec and General Counsel to draft a letter to Director Navarez with the goal of identifying the best way to ensure participation with our tribal community, and try to identify someone to participate moving forward. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, this is an attempt to visualize all of the activities that are going on behind the scenes in a Gantt chart. For those familiar, it's essentially just a visual tool. And so what you'll see on the left are different activities. On the y-axis there, on the x-axis you have the timing. And so this is just to demonstrate all the activities that the agency is currently undertaking, and when, and as you'll see, just to point out, in January through May, there will be a lot going on, even more so than there is today. So this is just to give a sense to the members of the public that there's a lot of amazing work going on behind the scenes. Perhaps this is the first time that it's been communicated in this way, but there's a lot going on to improve the agency from within, and I look forward to those results when we get there. Next slide, please. And this slide is meant to address a request from the directors of, essentially, it's meant to be a concise way to kind of, as a cheat sheet, to compare the activities that the city of Ukiah is currently undertaking as compared to West Yost, which is still under contract, with that contract set to expire this month, the end of this month, but they are still under contract and providing support for the city of Ukiah and the agency as a whole. And what you'll note is that with the exclusion of website and email maintenance and rate and fee implementation, the city of Ukiah is directly implementing all of the other service areas outlined in that administrative agreement. And then, as you'll see, West Yost, there is some overlap that remains with board meeting support and GSP implementation oversight, still somewhat falling on West Yost plate under that service agreement. So we look forward to continuing on this transition, and I think we're well underway in terms of completing that transition, which was set to take place again at the end of this month. Next slide, please. This is meant to just do a really quick, high-level snapshot of where the agency stands from a fiscal standpoint. I'll mention that the full details of these attachments are included in the agenda packet, although they were only added this morning. So for those that may have missed that over the weekend, I apologize. They are publicly accessible online as of this morning. And so I just want to point out a couple key things here. As the agency continues to be in a strong fiscal standpoint, to date, well, I should say, as of the end of November 2025, the agency has spent only 3.77% of its total budget. So we are well, I would say, under budget. We do have some outstanding invoices and some things that have come in the last few weeks, which would change that number. But we have plenty of money, I should just say, broadly, to continue to perform the functions throughout this year. And the only other point I'd like to just mention is our total liabilities and equity. And so again, for those who might be concerned about our fiscal standing, you can see that there's plenty of cash at hand to continue to do all of the functions that we've laid out for in this current fiscal year. And there are more details included in the entire attachment, but I just wanted to give a snapshot today for transparency. And with that, that concludes my presentation, and I would like to invite questions and comments.
I'll start off just by saying I requested a review from the general manager regarding the administrative services agreement. I was kind of hoping for more of a snapshot of what had happened over the past year, but at the same time, I appreciate the look forward in terms of what's going to be worked on over the next year. And I'll look to the board for questions and comments. Director Bailey.
Yeah, I have a couple. So I'm curious, in the report from Larry Walker and Associates, there was a lot of decisions that seemed like were made for efficiency because the timeline is really short, like one-on-one meetings instead of group meetings, and then a compressed timeline with stakeholder engagement and landowner access agreements, where there was repeating like, okay, we need to do this because we're pressed for time. And circling back to your comment about this last year, we authorized the signing of the contract June 12th. At our meeting on August 28th, we reminded, and at that meeting he said, oh, it'll be signed within a couple of days. It said in their slide it started October 15th. That's a multiple month delay, and so I'm curious, when you're talking about focusing on these other issues, we're now behind timelines on this critical study. How did your prioritization work of not getting that contract signed when the board was repeatedly requesting it, and then there's work going on other things where I don't remember conversations about the strategic plan, the JPA, yes, but circling back to other minutes, how did that prioritization shift?
Yeah, so there's a lot there. I think I'll try to answer as succinctly as I can. I think in terms of the timing that you walked us through, I believe that's generally correct. I think that there's more context needed, though, to kind of paint the whole picture. And one is the due diligence that's required on the back end. So, for example, the decision point to authorize the general manager to enter in negotiations and to develop these agreements, this is a $1.4 million agreement. There was a need at that time to renegotiate with the vendor, Larry Walker and Associates. So essentially, the board authorized myself to begin that work, and the work took a little bit longer than maybe we had anticipated. I think there was also some downtime in terms of waiting on responses back from vendors. There was the need to engage with general counsel, and I think perhaps this speaks more to the way that I and the city of Ukiah as administrators like to proceed, maybe in comparison to past predecessors. Really like to take a strong understanding of who we're getting involved with the work and doing the due diligence to really understand what's laid out in these agreements and how we're going to proceed. So there were lengthy conversations. I would say we may, the talking point of us being maybe a little bit behind on that project relative to where we were in the beginning is probably fair. But I don't believe it's to the detriment of the project, and I don't believe that the engagement timeline that we laid would have been really any different if we had started 3 months earlier. So I think we would have always tried to have expedited that work, and I think our conversations with Larry and Walker Associates would support that.
When you mentioned the JPA and the strategic plan, the operations and strategic plan, you mentioned consulting with the previous GM and staff and some consultants. What about other member agencies that you're working with that some of us are representing? Is there a consultation going on with those groups as well?
Yes, so the Facilitation Support Services Agreement was something that predated our involvement, the City of Ukiah's involvement. It was something that members of the TAC brought forward and spearheaded themselves, and I think we're in a really great place for that. So I think what was laid out at that time was a scope of work that included specifically to conduct this governance reform and update the JPAs and the bylaws. So we're simply carrying that torch. There was a need, if you recall, again, to do some due diligence. There was a major question mark of whether we could proceed with these pro bono services, and once we got that green light from General Counsel and DWR and Stantec, we've been well underway with that work. But to your point, the TAC, as well as the board, will have equal opportunity to review those proposed changes, and we look forward to those discussions over the next 6 months. We'd also like to just say for the different members listening in and present that there likely would be decision points for their own, for membership's own board of directors to take action that would authorize directors to approve of what we're proposing. So in essence, we'll be working with the directors to ensure that those items are brought forward to your boards in advance so that it's like streamlined. And in addition, I would just say in updates from GSA Legal Counsel, Jonathan Weldon will be providing a little bit more context as like how we see, from a formal standpoint, process standpoint, how we expect this process to look like over the next 6 months and what opportunities will exist for comment and for discussion and negotiation.
And then now, are you speaking about the JPA or the agency operations and strategic plan in terms of feedback and input?
We'll be seeking feedback and input for all of the deliverables that come out of this work. But what I was speaking to just now was the JPA and the bylaws. So that has the potential for the biggest impact on how this agency functions. And so obviously there'll be plenty of opportunity. It will be, it's important to add that we will need universal consensus across to proceed. So that, I think, in itself requires us to engage with everyone equally so that everyone is involved.
And one point that I noted in the minutes from previous meetings that wasn't addressed in the JPA and bylaws update that you mentioned now was the clarifying the conflict of interest information there.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, so we have a working document. I'm smiling just because it's a long document, and we have there are something like 20 or 30 individual points that we are looking to clarify in the JPA and the bylaws. And I think, it doesn't actually amount to much text because those are lengthy documents, but it does speak to the number of items that we're looking to improve on, one of those being conflict of interest.
Yeah, I had a comment because I was on a ad hoc for the facilitation, and there, I mean, we laid out kind of what the priority was, and it seemed like the big priority was the strategic plan to make sure that we're kind of, all marching in the same direction. And while we did have some changes to the JPA and our bylaws, there weren't that many that we had identified that were necessary, and so what you had presented sounded more complicated than we were really looking for. And so, I mean, because obviously I don't know that we really need to be looking at trying to how to remove directors, since we kind of are running into a problem with having a quorum, because some of our agencies, that they're already to appoint somebody is a little bit more complicated. And so I would prefer that we go in the other direction as much as legally possible to have as much flexibility. And, I don't know that there's really been a problem where we need to look for ways to get rid of directors.
Director Crane.
If there's conflict, director can recuse, and that still lets them be part of the greater discussion and all of the other discussions. So I support the concept you're speaking of.
Other comments, questions? Okay. Yeah, so again, General Manager Adams, my request was for this item to be regarding the agreement we have, and kind of walking through, I think I specifically asked for walking through the different services and what has happened over the last year. So personally, I don't feel like this is quite meeting that request. Again, I appreciate kind of looking forward, the work that's going to be done. That's also important. If you could move back to slide 2. I have a question about the transition update. Oop, I'm sorry, the one that's numbered 2, I think. There we go. So my question is around the fiscal and contract management. I believe that you're, yes, doing all of the contract management, but I'm not sure I'm understanding the fiscal portion of it, because my understanding is that West Yost is still involved in our fiscal management, as I'm on those email threads and seeing how our fiscal aspects are managed. So can you explain why you have them noted as a no?
Yeah, I'm noting that is that's an error. That should be yes for West Yost in terms of on the fiscal side. I think what might have threw me off there was the contract management side. So ideally, those probably should be broken out as 2 different things. In the contract, they're one. But you are correct that the city of Ukiah is working on the contract management side, and that West Yost is continuing their role as outlined in their scope for fiscal management.
And then is there a line item for grant management? I'm not seeing one, so I just want to make sure I'm not missing it.
Well, you're correct that grant management is part of the work that we're doing, and to date, West Yost is not involved in any of the grant management work. It probably would fall under contract management, as much of our grants are leaning on our vendors for support. But in terms of quarterly reporting, annual reporting, that is all flowing through the city of Ukiah.
Okay, and then another question. No, I'm just clarifying. Another question, looking at our contract language that was approved at our April meeting, but was actually in place earlier than that. There is a provision that speaks to the city's billing, and then the board's ability to review that billing. So the board shall review quarterly payments once per year to determine if the costs are exceeding the budgeted amount. And so I'm just curious for you, how is the project code for time spent on implementation of the tasks it performed pursuant to the agreement. How is that, working out, and when should the board expect to see those quarterly payments, and have those quarterly payments been happening?
So the city of Ukiah has not yet billed the agency for its services yet, and that was to prioritize other work. It was to limit the fiscal impact of this transition and to defer some of that billing into this current fiscal year as opposed to the previous fiscal year. But in terms of where we stand, we're tracking that information, both staff time, meeting time for the clerk's office, for staff within the water department. We're tracking that, and we plan on submitting that bill soon.
Okay, so just so I'm clear, there have not been quarterly payments done at all this entire year?
No, and just again for recollection, the city of Ukiah entered into this work in late February. So we are 9 months into that role. But no, we have not submitted an invoice yet to the agency.
I'm curious, you mentioned putting it off until the next fiscal year. Why would the city put off some of those hours to the next fiscal year?
We weren't putting off hours, we were simply delaying the invoicing for that. So what we've been doing during this process is, it's sort of like building a plane as you are flying it, right? So what we've been doing is trying to assess the level of effort needed to perform the services while also managing the cost. And so that put us in a position where we've got West Yost under transition, providing services, city is providing services, and we're taking, we've been monitoring how that's been going on, and we're in a position now where we can say, this is how much we have dedicated to this, and this is what we think it should look like moving forward. So what isn't included in that service agreement, it's not a fixed rate. If it was, it would be a very easy exercise. It would be at the end of the year or on a quarterly basis. The agreement is for $140,000. That's the price. There is no price. And so we could be billing quarterly. There's certainly nothing that's preventing us from that. It was just a simple decision on our part to manage costs while we incur additional costs of going through that transition. So for example, if we had billed the agency back in July, the agency would not have been in a better fiscal position at the end of that fiscal year. We would have had to incur those costs. Now that would better reflect maybe the work that's going on, but it doesn't necessarily benefit the agency to do it that way. So by delaying that, we've got opportunity to reassess the level of service that we want to provide, as well as what those costs might look like.
I'm understanding what you're saying. I think from my perspective is that there needs to be a level of transparency with the board, and I appreciate the City of Ukiah's efforts to maintain fiscal sustainability in this transition, but my concern is that there's not the information flowing to the board that it should be. Director Gasca.
I mean, do you have any idea of basically we're going to eventually get a bill? So I'm concerned that we're going to get hit with a lot larger bill than we anticipated.
Well, so if my understanding is that there's language in the agreement that basically sets a ceiling for that work. But my guess, based on the number of hours put in so far, is that it would actually be less than what we had estimated, which was, I think, was $140,000 per year.
Director Crane.
There's another way that this could be dealt with, and that is quarterly reports and periodic invoices, which would have achieved the same thing, and then this body would have had an idea of where we were. And my suspicion is, with all of the fires that run around your ankles and other people's ankles, that that simply didn't make it to the desktop.
Yeah, I believe that's correct. Again, managing this transition, it's been difficult, and what we've been trying to do is prioritize the key core functions of the agency. And so, that is emphasizing invoices to our vendors so that that work can continue. But I note and share the concern that there might be a lack of transparency or concern about not understanding what the true costs are yet. I think as a city, we're still trying to figure that out as well and put something together that is fair and balanced as to the work involved. So a lot of these things are difficult to track, and we're working to try to figure that out.
Well, I have a question. When you say difficult to track, what are the tools for tracking the expenditures? Is that happening in real time with each payroll, or is that a wet finger in the air at some date in the future, or a combination, or what? How's that been envisioned, and what's actually transpiring?
Yeah, so we have an Excel spreadsheet where I track my own hours and track, clerk office staff hours as well as across the city. And again, we'd be happy to invoice the agency as soon as possible.
Invoice is one thing, a report or understanding is another. And for some things, the understanding is first, the invoice is second. So what the city has done in deferring billing is appreciated. But there is a lack of appreciation for the lack of information about what the obligation has evolved to be to this point.
I can appreciate that, and I think we'll certainly look to rectify that latter piece.
Thank you.
Director Bailey?
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the specific things that I had noted in the financial reports, which, were downloaded from QuickBooks on December 11th and then made available about noon today before the meeting, is just the lack of activity. And, seeing in our agreement with the city that there would be a conversation quarterly between the city and the board, whether or not invoices were coming. We have no transparency of how much we're racking up. And so I'm just a little surprised in terms of your presentation about the financials just now. Didn't mention this, and you said that we have plenty of assets, but now it turns out that we have 3/4 of billing from the city, who's our lead administrative agency, that we have no idea how much they are. So I'm concerned about this. I mean, we're in a position of being fiscally responsible for the fees that we're collecting from all of our stakeholders, and then to have our lead administrative agency not providing us even the transparency or update about what kind of costs are being incurred, and then saying we have plenty of assets is difficult for me to feel like I'm getting the information I need to fulfill my duties.
You said something earlier this afternoon that stuck in my head as a red flag. And then you said there was plenty of money. Anytime anybody says there's plenty of money, I sort of wonder. It's just one of those things that my brain's wired to raise a red flag about. Because it seems like at the end of the day, there's hardly ever enough money. So that pointed to me that there's a disconnect so far.
All right, any other comments or questions? I think we have some public comment online.
Yes, we have two hands raised. Javier Silva, and go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hello, good evening. This is Javier Silva.
Javier, if you could just speak up a little bit, that would help us to hear you.
How's this?
I think that's better. Yeah, thank you.
Is that better? Yeah, okay. I'll be really close to the mic. So a couple things. I put some comments in the chat, but I've been involved with the TAC since the GSA inception, and I've been involved with the implementation of Sigma throughout the state since 2014, since its inception. So, been involved just primarily due to the fact that tribes will be impacted throughout the state on what agencies do on these lands. And so, um, first of all, I have been involved with the TAC on behalf of the Ukiah tribe, um, but you know, I have voiced many times. This is probably why it's frustrating that you know, I've personally talked with Director Navarez from Rhodes Valley. Have made it clear that you know he didn't have the capacity to attend and participate, not wanting to give up the tribal seat. So the tribes needed to meet and discuss that seat to determine which tribe would fill that, since you know Director Navarez wasn't going to be able to do that because we have I think it's 7 tribes in the basin that need to be reached out to and engaged. And so part of the work that we had identified with DWR and Stantec, because I think they did the study around, or the evaluations around, you know, the effectiveness or what how good the agency was doing around tribal engagement, and it came out that it wasn't that great. So, and it's you know it's both. It takes two. It takes both. You know, the tribes have to respond, and that's a huge undertaking for one tribe. So you're talking 7 tribes. It's a lot. So part of the as part of the scope and working with Stantec, and Stantec is aware of this, DWR is aware of this, that it was recommended that the tribe, in order to engage the tribes, it'd be best to use current um, the current venues and forums the tribes are already engaged in the Russian River, in the Eel River. The tribes are engaged in water issues, salmon recovery. I know Pinoleville is doing some fishery work, and Coyote Valley is doing some water monitoring. So, so as part of my recommendation to that scope of work, we you know, and it's not all put onto the agency, that we use these forums such as the environmental programs meeting monthly, the North Coast Resource Partnership, which I'm a part of also as a tribal engagement team. So we're constantly communicating with all the tribes in North Coast. So it's quite a bit of tribes. So we know the undertaking. So the North Coast Resource Partnership has invested in the tribal engagement team to do that. And so we put it on Department of Water Resources to, you know, fund part of that. We know that Ukiah Valley is not, you know, capable, or not capable, but not fiscally able to constantly, you know, be able to reach out to the tribes and vice versa. And so we wanted to at least use these forums and venues. I don't recommend sending a letter to Navarez. I think it'll take another 6 months to a year probably to get any type of communication. I can facilitate a conversation with him. I can also facilitate a conversation with the tribes about that seat. But I have been actively involved in the TAC. This is why it's kind of frustrating that I didn't hear anything about a one-on-one. But I have been serving on the TAC just as far as representing Ukiah and their interest in the watershed. But yeah, I just wanted to make sure that that's clear. I am. It's been over a year, I think, that we've been working on this. So I'm kind of like it's taken a long time. So let's make this fast. Thank you. That's all I had.
Dakota, go ahead.
Hello, good evening, everyone. Thank you for putting together this meeting today, and thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak today. I just
I'm sorry, Dakota, I may have accidentally muted you.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Yes, Dakota Perez. I'm the Pinoleville Pollination Water Resource Specialist. Thank you for having me today. Thank you for putting together this meeting, and thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak. I just wanted to comment on the tribal engagement opportunities or section about how there's a letter being drafted to Eddie Navarez on how to consult or how to consult with tribes. And I just wanted to offer a suggestion and a little peace of mind and some advice. Something that you guys should know is that one person does not represent or speak for multiple tribes. One person doesn't represent all the tribes in Ukiah Valley. You need to do your due diligence and reach out to all of these tribes. It doesn't matter if it's inefficient for you. It's not hard. You know, you send emails, you call, you go and you try to set up site visits, you facilitate meetings, you work with the people who are here, tribal representatives like I'm one, Javier is one. I'm sure there are multiple other tribal representatives in here working in the tribal environmental field who are looking into this project and this plan and looking at how it can impact tribal lands and tribal waters. So I ask that you do your due diligence and reach out to multiple tribes and don't lean on one person for the perspective of all the tribes, because tribes speak for themselves. Yes, you can set up facilitation through, say, a technical advisory committee member that is a tribal representative that can facilitate consultation with tribes, but I would recommend doing it with someone who is actually engaged with tribes and is really working with them on a frequent basis. With all due respect, I don't know if the tribal TACC is actually in the meeting today, and if they are, thank you for your time and your work. But I think that the TAC board needs to reach out to multiple tribal members, not just one person who's sitting on the seat. And like Javier said, if you need help facilitating these meetings, we can do so. We have a team of Mendocino Lake Sonoma Tribal Environmental Professionals group that I'm sure would be interested in receiving updates and providing input on the project. So that is my comment. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Dakota, I just wanted to respond to your comments. First off, completely appreciate your perspective on tribes can't speak for one another, and we definitely want to engage with all of the different tribes and respect that tribal sovereignty and the tribal consultation. Just for a point of clarification, the tribal engagement, I believe that was offered from our general manager. The draft letter is just one piece of the work that we'd like to see done. And that's just to Director Navarez because he is currently the tribal representative on our board. And I don't believe he's attended a meeting in the last couple of years. So that's just what the letter is regarding. And I'm certainly committed to seeing full tribal engagement, and I think the full board is as well. So just wanted to provide a little bit of reassurance to you that we're on the same page.
Thank you, Madeline. I appreciate that. It is frustrating for some of us who are doing a lot of work that are not receiving some of these updates and I'm not trying to disrespect or anything on anyone. It is frustrating to not be as involved as we can be, because tribes are doing a lot in the environmental field, and we can provide, very useful input. So, yeah, thank you for your due diligence. Thank you for responding and trying to figure out this tribal consultation effort. But we can definitely assist with that. Thank you.
I had one more point too to Dakota's point there, Madeline, if I could.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, go ahead.
Director. When we're talking about updating the bylaws, and I know that, it's been difficult for the tribal seat to participate, but definitely, like Dakota has been saying, that tribes are interested, and just it's the appropriate persons to be contacting. But when we're talking about revising the bylaws, and I think Pinoleville has made this point, but other tribes feel this too. It's just about finding that right person, but they would like, each tribe to have a seat at the table, on the board of directors and on the TAC, as much as possible. But, if there's any provisions to bylaws, that would be a recommendation. And, the tribes would discuss that if they were to, meet about this. So, thank you.
All right, is there any further public comment?
No other hands raised.
All right, thank you. We'll bring it back to the board for additional comments and questions.
Looping back to what we were talking about a bit ago, this body having a better understanding of what the burn rate's been on budget. We're on a fiscal year. How many quarters have been completed? 1. Is it possible at our next meeting? To me, it seems to be desirable to know what the burn has been, at least at that meeting. Is that something that this body would support?
Director Bailey?
Yeah, and I think ideally it would be by all the quarters that we haven't reviewed thus far. I mean, that's kind of in there's a city shall implement a project code for time spent, and we'll review the quarterly payments once per year. Since we haven't reviewed any of them, knowing what the level of effort has been since this agreement was signed seems important, especially as we've had some questions about how timelines are going and priority of tasks.
How far back?
I mean, to me, it seems like we haven't seen any visibility of this since this agreement was signed in April. I mean, I'm looking at the April dates, February. So we're not even a fiscal year in, and so reviewing from like the start of this agreement, how much has it cost to do this transition, and as we move to more ongoing stable state, how's that cost going? So okay. Seeing it by quarter, ideally.
So how much time has billing not been done for?
Well, to date, we have yet to invoice for the 11 months, 10 months, give or take, that we have been at the administrator.
So is there anything beyond that that we're lacking that predates that?
I don't think anything would predate that.
Okay. So to me, it would make sense to cover all of that time, each and every quarter, up to the most recently completed quarter. And we may be into, when do we meet again?
March.
March. Well, so then it should include the quarter that we're in as well.
Yes, sir. Yep. We will, knowing that quarterly reporting item is not something that maybe was top of my mind, so forgive me for missing on those. We will ensure that by the next board of directors meeting that there's a full transparent report broken out by quarter for the costs that the city of Ukiah has incurred to administer the agreement.
So it's two things. One is being aware, and the other is making payment. And so what I'm hearing and what I'm believing is that we haven't learned what the burn rate is, and we should be keeping track of that in a more timely fashion than we have been. Thank you.
All right, any other comments or questions? Seeing none, thank you to the general manager for that presentation. We will now move on to item 6B, updates from GSA Legal Counsel.
Hey, good evening, directors and chair, vice chair. I was asked by Blake to basically give a little bit of an overview of what we'll be looking at following, after we've made these substantive decisions about the JPA, about the bylaws. There'll come a time that we have to adopt it and put it into make it effective the way that the JPA and bylaws are currently effective now. So I did prepare just a little step-by-step like fact sheet here that I'll pull up. I'll share my screen just so that there's something for you to follow along with. Okay, are you able to see my screen now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Yeah, so Blake, of course, at our previous meetings, we've been discussing some of the types of things we're looking at for those updates. Staff is continuing to work with Stantec to lead the effort on, the kinds of things that the GSA has learned over the years that would improve operations and efficiency moving forward. And of course, some of you mentioned tonight, for example, to what extent do we prioritize removing board members versus having more flexibility for meeting things like quorum requirements. And those are all the types of things that we'll be looking at over the next several months. And of course, at every board meeting, I think moving forward, we'll have some form of an update for you. I'll defer to Blake exactly on when that would be presented, but this is in the works, and I'd expect that we'll need some feedback as we move forward here. So just starting with the general language of the.
Sorry to interrupt you. Do you mind zooming in on your document? It's just hard for us to see on the
sorry,
screen.
Of course, yeah. Whoops, maybe a little too far. Is that better?
I think so.
Okay, yeah, I don't think I can go much. It's just a Word document, so.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm not sure I can go a lot further. With the JPA, the language in both of the documents is pretty brief. So, we don't have tons of guidance, but that's pretty standard for these governing documents. This is just another effort to give flexibility for how the GSA does these kinds of things. So for the JPA, we need unanimous consent for any update. So that's why it's important as we move forward to make sure that we're keeping all of the member agencies informed, and that, we're not going to have some meeting, let's say, at the end of next year and say, here's our new JPA, like, we hope you like it. There'll be more of a process along the way, and we'll be relying on guidance from the board and, how that will be shaped. The bylaws are a little simpler. These just require a majority vote to approve the same way we would approve, say, a construction contract. There is a requirement to give notice of what will be changing. So this presumably would allow staff to draft an updated set of bylaws, give 30 days notice to the board, so that at the next meeting, the board could decide whether to adopt those updates. But again, here too, I think that we'll have that staff will employ a process along the way to allow the board to give input, so that there's some opportunity for feedback, and we're not, presenting a final document and asking for approval, late in the process. So that's just sort of, the language that we're working off of as to how to do this. So the way that this would typically play out is, as we've mentioned, Stantec is already carrying a lot of the effort with these updates, which I think is, we don't have any opposition for that. Of course, the documents are legal in nature, but the kinds of things that they will be working and the experience they bring is exactly what we would bring in our working with other JPAs and other agencies, except with the contract you have with Stantec, it will be much more cost efficient for Stantec and staff to carry that work, and then have a process for GSA Legal Counsel to review. And, we would then offer at that point revisions and little technical things that we think would be necessary from a legal perspective. So once we have a finalized, we all have an understanding of the kinds of things we want to change, and we do have some sort of a redlined version prepared. This is when we would look to the member agencies to ensure that you're following your own procedures when it comes to approving those changes. So the JPA, of course, is a significant document. It's your member agencies agreeing to be part of this thing. So this isn't something that we would typically want to take place solely within this governing body and solely within the GSA. We would want to make sure that the member agencies have an opportunity to bring these documents before your own boards and discuss if there's anything. This is where we would defer to your independent legal counsel at your respective agencies to make sure that we're authorizing these documents to be executed and amended pursuant to any sorts of codes or policies that you have in place. So for example, we might make a change that your entire board, you as the representative board member here at the GSA might approve, but maybe your entire boards back with your member agencies would want to weigh in as well more formally. So that's where we would hope that prior to the GSA formally voting to adopt these new updates, we would have evidence that each of your member agencies has, for example, by resolution, authorized, whether it's you or another staff member, to sign the new JPA agreement, so that we could then bring, maybe later next year, or, I'm not promising timelines at this point. I think Stantec and Blake have a better idea of that, but we would at one point have each of your member agencies' authorizations to enter this agreement. We would have a version that has been signed, and then we would take that version to the GSA, to you all here, for formal adoption. And of course, for the formal adoption process, we need unanimous consent of the board members, and we need a majority for the bylaws. The one thing I'll flag here that is part of the ongoing discussions here is to what extent the Ukiah Valley Water Authority and the timeline for their participation in the GSA. So it could be that by that point, they would be considered a member of the GSA, and their vote would be weighed as well. So that's another ongoing conversation. So then once we have the documents formally approved from the GSA, and we have a vote of this board that says, we're hereby no longer following the old documents, we're now following these new documents. Those new documents, the new JPA, the new bylaws, are now operative and valid. However, there are some subsequent steps we'll need to follow that are statutory, which is relatively straightforward. It involves providing within 30 days a copy of the amendments to the Secretary of State's office and the State Controller's office. And that's just a form. It looks like this. We would take care of this on behalf of the GSA, or GSA staff could do this part. It's not a very complicated process. It's just really saying, here's our old document, here's the new document, and that's it. And if for whatever reason this was not complied with and we missed that 30-day window, there isn't any detrimental, horrible things that would happen. It's there's a really technical consequence that involves bond financing. So if the GSA had grand plans involving bond financing, we'd certainly want to meet that 30-day deadline, and we want to meet it no matter what. I just always like flagging that the statute doesn't impose any super harsh penalty for not making that, but it's of course our goal that all statutory deadlines are met. And that was really all I had at this point. As I said, Blake wanted to make sure that you all were aware of the kinds of things that we're looking at timeline wise. So I would say that start thinking about whether your member agencies have certain timelines or meetings where these types of documents would be reviewed and approved, because as I mentioned before, the GSA does its part in formally adopting the documents. We would hope that each of your member agencies have independently approved the updates. And I welcome any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions from the board? All right. Thank you for that update. Any public comment online?
No public comment.
All right. Item 7, future agenda items and set next meeting date. I believe that Director Crane has already made a request for future agenda items. Are there?
It appeared to me we had consensus. All right.
Any other requests? Director Bailey?
Would there be time between now and then to work on this? You said the strategic plan and kind of you're already scoping how that's going to be formed, to provide an update on how the process of creating the strategic plan, not that it would be completed, but learning how that's working.
I'm sorry, Director Bailey, I'm just going to ask you to rephrase that. I think you're asking about sort of the processes specific to the strategic and operational plan development.
Yeah, so you mentioned that you're focusing on, and I'm just trying to get to the item here, the agency operations and strategic plan, and that you're in the process of developing that. I know the JPA is looking at June 2026, but if we could have an update on the plan for developing the agency operations and strategic plan, be curious how that's going.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just think, just one thing to clarify, I think it might be, again, I think, it's always, when you're a public agency, these activities are occurring, in meetings and emails, and there's low visibility for the public or for board of directors, for example. But the operations and strategic planning work, the governance reform work, the interconnected surface water, the discussions about the water year report, the well inventory phase 2, GSP periodic evaluation are all occurring simultaneously. So we've reached a point through this year in review. We've gone through this transition. We have everything stood up moving forward. So I would be happy to share updates at the next meeting as to all of the work that Stantec has been involved in, because it is very multidisciplinary.
Great. And the reason I called out the strategic planning in particular is that in every board I've been a part of, the board has an integral part to play in the strategic plan and ensuring that the goals in there align with the intent of the agency, and that it usually also sets up evaluation criteria for how the administration is performing against the strategic plan. And I see that you're concluding that on your slide in April of 2026. So I think the board getting an update in March so that we're able to be informed on the process, even if it's in the back end of your timeline, is important.
Received, yes. And I would also say we are leaning quite heavily on the TAC. So the TAC has a responsibility to, we will engage with the TAC and they will bring recommendations forward. And so that's sort of the process that we've been working to more sort of normalize this year, is elevating these topics in the right channels, going to the TAC first, getting input. For example, we did with, to get their feedback about whether we should do a periodic evaluation or a PA. In a similar vein, that's how we'll proceed. So the next opportunity we will have to engage with the TAC on this front will be February, and then we will meet in March and with the board of directors, and we'll provide that update.
Thank you.
All right, any other comments before we close out? Seeing none, our next meeting, Christine, anything?
That's right, you were just about to say.
Yeah, our next meeting is scheduled for March 12th, 1 p.m., and we will adjourn at 5:13 p.m.
Recording stopped.